As we launch the CBDC, for sure, it will be with a lot of synergy with the neighboring countries, because as this trade agreement and payment rail agreements get set up, yeah, and our overseas spending is quite a major portion. Yeah, so I think that will drive out adoption definitely. Yeah, so I'm seeing Singapore to continue to set the pace as the forerunner in terms of adoption. Over the last 10 years, we're seeing a lot of Singapore young entrepreneurs, and I think that's one of the best thing about nurturing and embracing new technology. And blockchain technology, one of the biggest motivation about volunteering my time with the blockchain technology, blockchain association, is really seeing how it has pushed our young our young generation to a lot of passion. MAS has two arms. Basically, they have one that's on policy supervision, and they have another arm on business development. And I thought that's a really brilliant way of splitting the regulator, because then one part of MAS has their mandate to go out and understand what the private companies are doing, what the startups are doing, what the industry is saying, and what the regulator should do. And the other part really looks into policy and governance. They don't, maybe they're not with the industry all the time, so that you create that balance internally.
Singapore, a country of 5.4 million people, a GDP of $397 billion. It's one of Greater Asia's most important financial centers, and it's one of the world's leading countries in digital asset innovation. The Blockchain Association Singapore is a trade organization focused on empowering its members and the community to leverage blockchain and scalable technologies for business growth and transformation. In the season finale of Emerging Voices, I interviewed Binru Tan, Chairwoman of the Blockchain Association Singapore. During our conversation, we discussed how the BAS is contributing to shape Singapore's digital asset economy, Binru's goals and objectives as the organization's chairwoman, Singapore's blockchain ecosystem and regulatory development, institutional and retail interest in digital assets, and more. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. And now, on to the show. Well, it's an honor to have you as our season finale guest, Binru. In addition to being the chairwoman of the BAS, you're a leader in Singapore. You're on a number of corporate boards. You've been a C-level executive for many years, and you're currently the president of ST Engineering. You've had a career in technology since the 90s, and the arc of your career has coincided with the growth and importance of Singapore as a technology and economic hub in Asia and the world. Let's get to know the BAS and you a little better first. Binru, for the uninitiated, what is the Blockchain Association Singapore?
There are many associations now in Singapore, but we're one of the first ones in 2019. The Blockchain Association of Singapore started when there are only a handful of blockchain startups in Singapore back in 2019. We are sponsored by MAS today, which is the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And it aims to really just grow the ecosystem. You know, back in 2018 or 19, really there not a lot of people know about blockchain, and there wasn't also a clear direction of growing the ecosystem, and it's purely with a few founders who, for the love of a new tech, that we decided to set up the association, just kind of to pull people together. I remember at that time, our initial target is to get 30 members, and we didn't hit the target. So we were a little disappointed, but as of today, we have about 300 to 400 members. And the reason why it's 300 to 400, because at the peak, before the winter, it was at the peak about 400 members. I would think that over the winter, we would have lost some members as they decide to pivot their business in one way or the other. So roughly about 300 members still today. But we're not the only blockchain association in Singapore, so there are a couple of others as well. And I'm pretty sure there are more than 300 in Singapore.
And although I just gave a brief introduction of your career, could you share more about your professional background in technology? What kind of technologies have you been working with? And could you tell us more about your new position that you recently started?
Sure, definitely. Yeah. I I think I have been fortunate in my career. I'm really not a comp science student, as in I don't do any coding. I'm a math student. And I kind of fell in love with the dynamics of selling technology in the early days. So I started um, maybe back about 20 years ago in HP, kind of selling hardware, really kind of selling hardware to begin with. And then in Microsoft, a lot of cloud. I happened um, to at the start of the era whereby cloud adoption is very low. When I joined Microsoft, cloud adoption was like at the low 5% mark. And you really have then seen the shift while during my journey in Microsoft for cloud adoption to really move cross the 50% mark. And it was also at that time that there was a lot of fintech startups in Singapore. I think Singapore is a nice location to be in because you see these trends coming in waves, usually at the beginning. So in 2018, when I decided to join the fintech startups, that's also when I decided to help out with the Blockchain Association. So I would say that my career has been very fortunate to ride the wave of these growing technology trends in Singapore. Yeah, and in the fintech area, that's when all the AI, KYC, or all the remote handling stuff. There's a lot of Chinese companies also during that time that moved to Singapore. So it's a good time to pick up that skills. So I would say my technology skills are really from experience. Yeah, it's really from experience. I wouldn't say it's easy for younger people now because right you need that knowledge in order to do the sales. Yeah, but my client base has always been the financial institutions, and therefore I'm familiar with what the financial institutions are looking for. Yeah, so fortunate that I'm in the right place at the right time. Right now I'm with Singapore Technologies. It's the first local company that I'm contributing to. It has always been US companies or Chinese MNCs that I've been working for. Yeah, so and I really enjoy the startup pace, but I'm getting a little overage for the startup. So contributing to a local MNC right now is the right time and the right contribution given my years of journey with the startup ecosystem.
I love it. What a distinguished and interesting background. And I can only imagine the depth of interesting experiences you had in such a fast growing part of the world throughout your career. Benru, when you reflect back on the pace of development and importance of Singapore, what stands out to you as some of the most important events and changes, both economically and technologically in Singapore?
Mm. Yeah, I think the entrepreneur startup, the entrepreneur spirit in the generation was really lacking in my generation. Singapore is a relatively stable, risk averse to a certain extent country. Yeah. So and my generation really grew up in a stable economy. My parents during my era would ask that you have a stable job, so entrepreneur spirit to a certain extent for the longest time was lacking in Singapore. But over the last 10 years we're seeing a lot of Singapore young entrepreneurs and I think that's one of the best thing about nurturing and embracing new technology. And blockchain technology, one of the biggest motivation about volunteering my time with the blockchain technology, blockchain association, is really seeing how it has pushed um, our young generation to a lot of passion. You know, for quite a period of time, there was a lot of discussions about strawberry generation. I don't know whether you know the term strawberry. Strawberries are hard to they it's hard to nurture strawberries or hard to grow strawberries because they cannot stand too cold, they cannot take too much heat as well, right? So and we have always referred our generation who grew up in comfortable Singapore as the strawberry generation. They can't take hardships and is they prefer to be comfortable. Yeah, but I'm seeing a different generation as the technology wave of Gen AI and blockchain coming along, giving our young generation hope. giving our young generation motivation to do better. Yeah, so I think in the association, I've seen a lot of young founders. That is really a good encouragement to nurturing our population for the future.
Well, that segues really nicely to continue getting to know the BAS a little more and the work it's doing regionally and internationally to promote blockchain literacy and build a strong talent pipeline for the digital economy in Singapore. Benru, what is the vision and objectives of the BAS, and what kind of role does the BAS play in shaping blockchain in Singapore, as well as the country's regulatory and policy framework regarding blockchain and digital assets?
Initially, we started mainly with just community building because we wanted to make sure that that community doesn't die a natural death and that there is networking opportunities. At that time, also from the emerging countries, there was a lot of new startups that see Singapore as a nice geography, a strategic location to get either investors or partnerships, right? So the first 2 years of the association, we focus on selling Singapore as a nice spot. And then there was also supportive government grants to help them set up shop in Singapore. So that community building was the key. In the later stage, we realized that when the memberships kind of really grew, and then we're starting to see also different ecosystem besides the emerging startups. The services starts to appear, legal services, auditing services. So as the services starts to appear also, besides the tech, layer one protocols and stuff. So the ecosystem then became relatively complete. That was also when we feel that a lot of education needs to come in, because that's also the period of time that the government is rolling out policies. People are a little afraid of retroactive governance. But it is hard for the central bank because it is tech that I would say out of all the tech to educate, I'm constantly also educating customers on new tech, and blockchain is really difficult to explain, and blockchain together with crypto becomes a totally different ecosystem of stuff to explain to the customers. So the central bank is the same thing. They have to learn alongside with us. Yeah. So as they craft out the policies, a lot of our work then becomes policy feedbacks back to the central bank, working with central bank to craft these policies, get feedbacks from the ecosystem, and then also to educate the members with regards to implementation of these policies, keeping to this adherence to these policies. So large part of our work now is education and regulations.
I do want to come back to policy and regulation later in our conversation. We're speaking in late January. We're very much early in 2024. You are now the chairwoman of the BAS. What direction do you want to take the BAS in the new year? And what are some of your goals and objectives for the BAS?
Actually, from last year, we started a blockchain explorer program. Yeah, and it's a program for the higher learning institutes, for the schools, because I remember the schools called me up and they asked, can we set up a career? Can we participate? Can we get blockchain association members to participate in a career fair of the schools? And the schools were telling us that because why our young people would like to join the blockchain industry, and they are excited to join a startup, and especially blockchain is so new and that's what they want to do. So they went to the career fair and they were looking for a blockchain startup and they couldn't find. So then the school came to us, our next career fair, could you bring members to set up booth, and the association being not for profit, you need not pay for this booth, etc. And initially we were just going to get members. If you need interns, can you please set up the booth? But later on we realized that we hold a responsibility with regards to where the intern is working at, because why as the blockchain industry is growing, the industry itself is also learning. And for someone that's a undergraduate has never worked before, you probably will not know basic fundamental compliance knowledge with regards to what is allowed, what is not allowed, basic stuff like understanding money laundering, understanding basic compliance, segregation of duties. These are knowledge that in my era, I have learned it as I worked over the years. And therefore, we started a Blockchain Explorer program. We want to make sure that these youngsters are willing to get educated and sign up, say, for a day's course for us to educate them. And then we also vet and connect the right companies to the right interns because we feel responsible that we're bringing young generations into blockchain companies as their first job. So that comes together with both excitement as well as knowledge that's required. So the Blockchain Explorer program has been our focus for the last 6 or 9 months, and we continue to do a lot of work in that space. Besides the work with the regulator as well as the founders. But talking about education, the hardest to educate is not young interns. It's actually founders. And I know, John, you're a founder yourself, right? So then I think founders comes with needs to have a lot of passion in the work, needs to have a lot of foresight and vision for their company. So retroactive regulations and especially ethics or compliance may sound at times counterintuitive to growth of the business. So that's a little harder, but we continue to encourage founders to come to the association, meet people, and get knowledgeable about regulations and how to pivot your business in such a way that you can still survive despite the retroactive regulations.
I love this Blockchain Explorer program. I wish there was something like this when I was an undergrad, although when I was an undergrad, it was just the infancy of Bitcoin. It wasn't on anyone's radar. But what you said about teaching compliance, teaching about anti-money laundering, teaching about know your customer, KYC. I mean, with a background in banking myself, I learned this like you on the job. And also being a founder, I've interfaced with many other founders that are working with blockchain and digital assets in some way that may not have a traditional financial background. And kind of to your observations, this is an area of growth for many founders, an important area as we see this incoming wave of regulation. It pertains to AML, anti-money laundering, KYC, know your customer, in the case of US, OFAC or sanctions. I mean, these are very important concepts that predates digital assets for decades. So I commend this program. I hope to see this rolled out, perhaps internationally by the BAS or from other trade associations around the world. Really amazing. Now let's pivot the conversation and talk about Singapore a little bit more as a digital asset ecosystem, as well as a fintech hub. For anyone that isn't following the development of blockchain and digital assets in Asia Pacific, Singapore, in my opinion, is one of the leading, if not the leading market in the region, particularly due to the monetary authority of Singapore's approach to developing regulation, its embrace of new financial technology and forward-thinking vision. Bin Rue, what makes Singapore's digital asset ecosystem unique and competitive compared to other global fintech hubs? And what strategic advantages does Singapore offer that make it an attractive hub for blockchain and digital asset businesses?
Many factors. I think we're first one of the first few that really opened up to embrace blockchain companies into Singapore. So being forward-looking, our regulator being forward-looking, I think that's very important because it is easy to kind of wait and see, follow trends a little. But the Singapore government, I think, especially MAS, has been very forward-looking in terms of embracing new tech. The Singapore FinTech Association started before the Blockchain Association. So, and right now we have, I think, if I'm not wrong, about 1,000 members in the Singapore FinTech Association. And it is it's a matured, it's very matured association, all kinds of fintechs from AIs. There are also some blockchain companies there. And so, given that the last decade we have been very open, I think we are also one of the first few countries that has grants, very clear grants that's targeting startup technology or accelerator programs. So when I checked in with the other countries, not maybe they're generic development funds, but then they're not so focused in bringing these startups here. Yeah, so I think that's one component. The other component is perhaps unique to Singapore. We are quite international despite our small size. So even race-wise, racial harmony-wise, I mean, all kinds of. So you can be from India, you can be from Middle East, US, and you kind of most expats feel quite at home in Singapore. Yeah, so we attract quite a bit of an international presence. Our geography reach to Southeast Asia, I think, is also a definitely an advantage, because for a lot of startups that wants to find a spot in Asia Pacific to spearhead into, say, Indonesia or Thailand, a very easy geography will be Singapore, so that your expats can be here. Increasingly is also changing as the landscape. I'm seeing also a lot of expats are able to go live in Malaysia or in Thailand. Yeah, but you know, for the longest time, Singapore is an easy place for expats. So I think many components has helped us along to be a good area for startups. And a lot of times you also realize that their business may not necessarily be in Singapore. So a lot of these startups, their actual clients are in Indonesia, in Thailand, in Vietnam, yeah, and which is a couple hours of flights away.
In my opinion, a lot of media coverage around blockchain and cryptocurrency, especially emerging startups, tends to be focused on the United States and then Europe. I believe that focusing on emerging markets, though, is important not just for blockchain and crypto, but in general, because future growth will come from emerging markets. Benru, for people that aren't following Singapore or fast-growing economies in Asia Pacific, how would you describe the Web3 startup ecosystem in Singapore? And who are some of the Web3 native startups that come to mind that are making an impact in Singapore and the region?
So if you look at the ecosystem that we have currently, it's actually quite complete. There is a chart, maybe I'll send you offline, that maps out all our members from layer one protocol. So I think all the layer one protocols are part of the association. Applications, all kinds of applications, from retail applications, you know, B2B applications, yeah, so payment related companies, yeah, legal services, tons of services, audit services. So when we mapped out the ecosystem, we were pleasantly surprised, because a lot of people would assume that we are majority of our members will be crypto exchanges, but actually they're not. Crypto exchanges is about 25-30% of our member base. The rest of them is really supporting ecosystems. Yeah, so and then now we also have a lot of audit companies, forensics companies, compliance related crypto companies, yeah, Web3 companies. So I would say the ecosystem is very balanced, and it does require that balanced ecosystem for things to work.
Now, it's been roughly a couple of years that Singapore began developing blockchain and crypto regulation, as well as testing CBDCs with a consortium of central banks. For our viewers' edification, how has Singapore's regulatory approach to digital assets evolved over the last couple of years? And how has the country's approach to crypto regulation contributed to positioning it as a regional and global crypto hub, this frankly almost mature ecosystem that you just described?
I have not seen, or maybe I have also not worked as closely, to be fair, with other central banks. But if I were to do just nearby comparisons, I've not seen another central bank that will engage the startup ecosystem via a WhatsApp group chat. So today, we basically, like the Blockchain Association has this member group chat whereby the regulator is part of the group chat. Yeah, and also the fintech association is the same thing. Sometimes we can real time ask a question about any regulations or complain for that matter about regulations over WhatsApp, and we may not get it addressed, but is that engaging? And MAS has two arms. Basically, they have one that's on policy supervision, and they have another arm on business development. And I thought that's a really brilliant way of splitting the regulator, because then one part of MAS has that mandate to go out and understand what the private companies are doing, what the startups are doing, what the industry is saying, and what the regulator should do. And the other part really looks into policy and governance. They don't, maybe they're not with the industry all the time, so that you create that balance internally. And I think that way of is a really good idea, and we're seeing that really yielding good impact on the industry, as the industry grew. And even though right now we are adjusting policies as we learn, right? And also due to the recent AML cases, as the government learns and they tweak some of these policies, I think it comes with good learnings that maybe our neighboring countries should really reference because these learnings, these learnings all came with a price, right? So we've paid our price for learning. So as the association grew, yes, we've gotten a good base. We've gotten the right players, we've gotten the wrong ones. And then as we balance things out a little with clearer policies, I think the ecosystem will become healthier. And each wave it becomes healthier, and each learnings is a little subtle. I think whatever we learned as a nation, say over the last 5 years, should really be studied by the neighboring countries so that they will not repeat similar mistakes, and that the high chance will be able to then have clearer policies faster over time, as well as the crypto companies kind of expand their business to Southeast Asia countries.
What an
Mm.
interesting, perspective that you just shared, particularly the part about this business development arm of the MAS. I mean, something that perhaps is sometimes said about policy and regulation, it lags innovation. And by the time policy and regulation is developed, perhaps innovation, particularly technological innovation, has far exceeded the regulation that's been developed. And so to listen to you talk about a country's, perhaps one of the most important institution of any country, kind of leaning in, working with companies, seeking out those companies, listening and working to them is really clever. And I have to agree with you that other central banks and monetary authorities should look to Singapore and follow at least this example.
Yeah,
Now, I'd
and
like to.
the policies that is being rolled out, there's actually a window that MAS will engage the community or the associations to get feedbacks before they officialize it. So after they listen to us, the first draft of the policy doesn't come out and catch us by surprise. They actually get further inputs after the first round of inputs. So the three associations, we have three associations that works very closely with MAS. Besides the Blockchain Association, the FinTech Association, there's another one called Access. And these three association actually gets invited to look at the final draft and still provide inputs before it's announced. Yeah, and we also have instances whereby we managed to suggest some changes even though it's in its final draft. So I think that really validates the openness of the regulator to make sure they are regulating something that is useful to the industry. Yeah, and despite me saying that, a lot of times the industry comes with our own agenda. So being the regulator is very hard. As you choose to listen, it's not a matter of should I just choose to listen or not, because you're gonna get all kinds of inputs with different agendas, and to sieve and make sense out of all the inputs is a hard thing to do.
And this is a key differentiator, I think, for Singapore to have a regulatory body that's not just friendly but cooperative. This seeking the impact feedback that you just mentioned, but as well as giving associations the opportunity to review incoming regulation, give
Yeah.
that feedback. It really demonstrates this ambition to foster innovation. And that's a real competitive advantage, in my opinion. Now, there is a perspective occasionally in the media that describes the MAS's approach to regulating the industry and issuing licenses as very strict, with a licensing regime that is too difficult. And now, I'm of the opinion that erring on the side of caution to mitigate risks pertaining to money laundering, terrorist financing, and bolstering know your customer policies is the right move for any healthy and well-functioning financial system, especially as new financial technologies emerge, as well as considering the history of hacks and scandals in crypto. However, at the same time, for emerging fintechs who may be legitimate smaller players, the cost of compliance may be too high and too difficult to comply with, which runs the risk of stifling innovation due to regulation. Binru, what is your opinion on this perspective that can add some depth and local perspective to this observation? And what is your assessment of how the MAS has been doing to balance the need for robust regulation without stifling innovation in blockchain? You just spoke about this ability and desire to work with startups, but there is also this other perspective of the same coin. No pun intended.
Totally. Whenever I feel that MAS is being strict, I would compare it with the traditional institutions. So if you look at the banking institutions, MAS is very, very strict. Yeah. So sometimes our startup ecosystems um fail to appreciate what they already have. so so the process, and I think it is important for our regulator to embrace technology, so you don't kill something that's in the nurturing stage and you allow it to blossom a bit, right? And but when you need to tighten, there are learnings as the regulator, unfortunately, is a bit as a bit of a lagging indicator, and they're trying to be a fast lagging indicator, right? So and therefore there's bound to be some a lot of people say, did MAS U-turn, did whatever. I'll be afraid if my regulator dare not U-turn, if yeah, or dare not embrace. I think the fact that we've encouraged these, and we realize, okay, the moment we saw the problem a little clearer, that it needs to be tightened a little, for sure you're gonna hear complaints. But I feel that as long as the reason, like I think that the general complaint was the application of the DLT license that took too long. Yeah, and the DLT license took too long for good reasons, because as we grew the ecosystem too much, we have a lot of applications. A lot of different businesses were trying to applying the same license, and the scope of the license also was not well thought through. That potentially could be up for kind of gray areas or potential areas of abuse. Yeah, so I think there are good reasons why we slow down when we need to slow down as a nation. Yeah, from a regulator's point of view. Yeah. So, but when I compare it to traditional finance, I would say that I think have been we have been very we've given a lot of allowance to the startups, in my view. so I think that we really want our startup ecosystem to grow, and for that matter, we've given a lot of allowance. And regulator will continue to hear this feedback. The association will as well. And I think net outcome would still be a positive one, because even though certain things takes longer, I'm hoping then it will be clearer in the end on the value that you can contribute, and also clearer in how you can grow, rather than being too fast and then things need to change along the way. Yeah.
Let's move on to discuss institutional interest in digital assets. Singapore and Asia Pacific aside, in general, there is a growing enthusiasm from institutional players to play a role in the blockchain and digital asset industry, from accredited investor funds to institutional custody providers, the latter of which is an area that I anticipate will continue to be a growing pie now and in the coming years. Binru, what trends and factors are you observing in institutional interest and engagement in digital assets in Singapore and across Asia Pacific?
In general, so I've been helping financial institutions to understand blockchain, conduct pilots, but the traditional financial institute pace has been relatively disappointing. And there was a lot of POCs done. Maybe the POCs have now kind of a little better, but if I look at the last 10 years, I would say still disappointed with the adoption pace. It may look a little bit more optimistic now with potentially CBDC taking off in a much bigger way. But digitization of real world assets is it's just a bigger POC currently. I don't see that it will be launched in a big way. Financial institutions high chance will wait for CBDC to be launched. They will adopt they will take a wait and see kind of mindset. Maybe there's one or two JP Morgan, Citibank that's a little bit more forward looking, but still it's not a big project. Still, a lot of them are small projects within the bank. Their core business, when your core business is too important, high chance you're not gonna put all that you have into something new. Yeah, so overall, and with the winter has kind of dragged already in the second year. From where I see is still slow for financial institutions to adopt. I am seeing though the startup ecosystems having some new wave of stuff, which is compliance related, protection of assets related, and these learnings are important when it comes to financial institute, because the whole startup ecosystem from speculative has gone into now a little bit more on protection of assets, custodies, solutions. And these are the right conversations to increase the comfort level of the financial institutions. So I see that wave a whole lot more, and that gave me some hope that financial institutions will quicken their pace a little. But currently, not yet.
And from my days in banking, when we talk about innovation inside the company, it's sometimes joked that innovation moves at the pace of the bank. This pace that you talked about, that frankly is not fast. It's very risk averse. And your reference to business units, particularly in treasury services, they're huge money makers for the bank. And we're talking about emerging technologies that may cannibalize this business, that may kill the golden goose. And especially for managing directors and business unit CEOs, with all due respect to them, it's their little fiefdom, and they don't want their success to go away, or this money machine, no pun intended, to stop. So it is perhaps a reflection of just the way financial institutions operate when it comes to new technologies. But that's where trade associations and local leaders like you come in to help educate the leaders to embrace what's coming so they don't fall behind.
From where I'm seeing the startups is moving the fastest. Actually, the regulator is faster than the financial institutions. So the regulator, from doing a lot of pilots, Project Orchid, and a lot of discussions on the regulator to understand while catching up with the startups. I think when the CBDC gets launched, then the financial institutions will probably start moving in tandem with the regulator, kind of take the cue from the regulator.
Now, what about retail interest in demand for digital assets? Chainalysis ranks Singapore 77th out of 155 countries for retail crypto adoption. How do local Singaporeans feel about digital assets and blockchain in general? And how do retail users want to use digital assets in Singapore?
I think we are too we're too comfortable in a small country. We don't have even moving out of cash adoption took a while for us, even though we have the latest tech and we're pretty advanced as a country, infrastructure is sound, but there isn't a need to move out of cash. Why? Because there is an ATM machine every 100 meters. Every time you go to a grocery store, there is always an ATM machine. So the ability to draw cash was so easy in a small country that and so convenient that people didn't feel the need to go cashless, right? So finally, we are now cashless or much more cashless than before. I don't actually. I think there's going to be still a bit of time to go for retail. So you'll find that CBDC is probably going to be wholesale. I think we will be ranked if the ranking splits wholesale and retail. I think our ranking for retail will be really low. Wholesale hopefully a little faster.
Now, Hong Kong is another financial center that's striving to catch up to Singapore and be a digital asset hub, as demonstrated by its own regulatory development, courtship of both retail and institutional blockchain and digital asset service providers, and this week's news about a new Bitcoin ETF application led by Harvest Global Investments, an asset management company from China. Now, aside from Singapore and Hong Kong, what other markets in Asia Pacific are you paying attention to, Binru, whose blockchain and digital asset ecosystems appear to be growing quickly in terms of both retail and institutional interest and startups?
So typically, we look at China because Singapore is one of the largest trading partners with China. And also a lot of our startup ecosystems are Chinese companies, yeah, from China. Yeah. So China that but it's different. You cannot compare. We take a lot of trends and technology references from China. But where the country is large is where retail is really progressive. So all the e-renminbi and when you look at China, of course you look at India. I think they're just running a race to roll out the e-rupee versus the e-renminbi. But in China, I think from a timing perspective, they launched maybe the longest, and then over COVID, okay, perhaps it's kind of slowed down a little over COVID. But a lot of the banks have participated. They are already using the e-renminbi. And there is a real use case, especially if it crosses to Hong Kong, because so when I was working with Ping An, the Chinese company in Shenzhen, you'll find that if you use cash, you just need you cross Shenzhen to Hong Kong and you need to switch to the Hong Kong dollar instead of the renminbi, right? So but with the e-renminbi now is acceptable in Hong Kong. So I think there are some real convenience to the users that's in the borders. Yeah, so and so large countries where coverage is difficult, for sure, I think it will take off. In the nearer Southeast Asia countries, we are also seeing certain countries a little bit more progressive. Philippines, Thailand, I think these two are very progressive in terms of crypto adoption or retail adoption as a whole. Middle East, we are seeing also quite a good adoption. Middle East, Dubai, Bahrain, Saudi, faster than we thought. Yeah, so globally, I think there's some good trends, But I think that you must have either a currency that is maybe not so stable, or potentially a large geography or large land size that is hard to cover. For Singapore, I struggle to find the right reason for this adoption. We love tech, and I think as it grows, the younger generation would high chance be able to push forward with the adoption. Yeah, but we're high chance going to be a lagger for Singapore for retail adoption.
Now, you mentioned the e-renminbi. That's it's interesting that you reference that and the let's call it potential or perhaps even upcoming ability for it to be used in Hong Kong. I remember reading perhaps in the last couple of months that there was, I believe, a trial for the e-renminbi to be used in Singapore. Could you provide
Mm.
some more perspective on that?
Okay, I don't have insights. Indeed, there was a trial for e-renminbi to be used here. I don't have insights to this, but then the Singapore government has been in good relationships with the Chinese governments, and we're always piloting not just the Chinese government, but also like we're connected to the India payment rails, the Thailand payment rails, because that's where Singaporeans always we're too small, so we always go on holidays. And if you go Thailand shopping and you want to be able to pay easily, yeah, so there's a lot of plus and convenience. So there's a lot of demand for payments to be easy across the two countries. Yeah, so I won't be surprised if it's being piloted right now. But for everything retail right now, it's still in the pilot stage. So I'm not sure if in the near future we're going to see it launch. But for CBDC, if you look at the latest PwC report, myself was also amazed, right? It says more than 90%, in fact, I think 92 or 94% of central banks globally are looking at launching CBDC. And more than 20% has put this year, 2024, as a go live target year. So that's a lot of movements for CBDC. So for sure, I think this year is going to be a pivotal year for CBDC. We're going to see it progress faster than we think.
Well, we're approaching the end of our conversation. I'd like to stay on this topic and continue talking about CBDCs and the BAS's role in Singapore's development of at least a wholesale CBDC. Singapore has been on the forefront of CBDC research and development and certainly has positioned itself as a leader in this emerging area of fintech. And the MAS's partnership with the Bank of International Settlements and other central banks in the region underscores their commitment to enhancing Singapore's fintech ecosystem that we've been talking about over the last hour. Now, I'm very interested, how has the BAS contributed to Singapore's CBDC R&D, whether it be thought leadership, design recommendations, or policy recommendations?
So actually, the MAS pilot has included a lot of universities, a lot of quite a number of banks, and also members from the association. And mainly they are either level 1 protocols or they are DLT licenses. Then they participated in the association ourselves don't participate in the POC. So a lot of the pilots came from members of the association. So a lot of times, I think from a regulatory perspective, we will provide feedbacks. But from a pilot perspective, that's really the people running the business per se. Yeah. Going forward, I really think it's continued rigor in this, because Singapore has already kind of started early. We also learned early. So as the other countries are getting things together, and I think they will grow at a faster pace, leveraging on our learnings. We need continued rigor in this. So as we see the ecosystem kind of get stronger and clearer in what they want to do, I'm pretty sure also new challenges will come up. The compliance solutions that is coming out, I thought is very forward-looking in terms of how to protect assets, how to build trust, and I like that new wave of ideas that's flowing around. And if we get the right actors in the ecosystem, I think we will be a much stronger blockchain ecosystem when CBDC gets launched.
Now, considering Singapore's role in the Asia-Pacific financial sector, how do you envision the successful implementation of either a wholesale and/or retail CBDC at some point impact regional or even global financial dynamics?
Not too sure about global dynamics at this point in time, but I think Southeast Asia for sure will be will quite a bit of a influence for the Southeast Asia countries. Yeah, so I think as we launch the CBDC, for sure, it will be with a lot of synergy with the neighboring countries, because as this trade agreement and payment rail agreements get set up, Yeah, and our overseas spending is quite a major portion. Yeah, so I think that will drive out adoption definitely. Yeah, so I'm seeing Singapore to continue to set the pace as the forerunner in terms of adoption. I'm also seeing that our regulations that's launched or published, say for stable coins, governance, etc., is also being referenced and adopted by our neighboring countries. So as the framework gets better and better aligned, the concept of ASEAN as one country seems to move closer. And I didn't start with having these grand plans for blockchain, but it's really looking like it is driving a lot of unity, even though it started from speculation, but in the event that it is not outside of speculation, it's actually driving a lot of unity among the countries, starting from the payment methods and the payment rails.
Now let's wrap up our conversation today to listen to your thoughts about the future of Singapore and Asia Pacific in blockchain and digital assets. Binru, looking ahead, how do you envision Singapore's blockchain landscape and role in the future development of the blockchain and digital asset industry in the next decade, especially in terms of leading or influencing innovation both in the country, in Asia Pacific, as well as looking beyond the region as well?
One component that I feel Singapore kind of wants to grow for the longest time and is maybe a little hard, and that's we want more R&D to be here. But you'll find that as you attract these companies over and they are doing um, a bit of a control tower work or the HQ being here, because you can get um, the expats, the think tank kind of is here. Yeah, but the R&D work usually needs to sit where the projects are, where the clients are. Yeah, and it's hard to actually do a pilot here if your target audience is not here. Yeah, so that's something that I think we will continue to evolve. And I think for CBDC, if it gets launched, hopefully is on par globally with everyone. You know, with the fintech, you get this problem that is for usually financial inclusion, and Singapore is 98% banked, and therefore it's hard to pilot anything new for fintech in Singapore. But for CBDC, I feel like if we could start with strong R&D here and really implementation of adoption here in Singapore, that would be something that the association would be very excited with. And as we grow the talents and our young generations, we're also hoping that together with a good supply of talents in this area, we will really make it come through that it is home ground learnings first on the implementation.
Binru, thank you very much for being a guest on the show and sharing your insights and perspectives. To learn more about the Blockchain Association and how it seeks to empower its members and the community to leverage blockchain and scalable technologies for business growth and transformation, you may go to singaporeblockchain.org. That does it for this season of Emerging Voices and EmergingCrypto.io podcast. I'm John Lira. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next season.